We'll pick up from what we left off last week. In Matthew 24, verses 15 through 28, there were particular instructions that Jesus was giving when they would see the abomination of desolation. They would get out of town fast. What does he mean by the abomination of desolation? Anybody know what he's talking about? See the manual?
Was that not the prophecy of Daniel?
Prophecy of Daniel. Okay, I'm sorry. Can't hear very well. The prophecy of Daniel in chapter 9, as a matter of fact. If you please turn to Daniel chapter 9. There is a prophecy. We won't go into this in depth, but we'll just sort of touch on this. The prophecy from Daniel chapter 9, beginning in verse 23. Daniel had been praying, and God sent an angel to talk to him to reveal this, what would come to pass. And as you see in verse 23, at the beginning of thy supplications, the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision. So this angel is revealing these things to Daniel. And he says in verse 24, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people, upon thy holy city, to finish the transgression, and to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision of prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So he's talking about Christ coming to die on the cross to bring an end to sins. In what way? That sins could be forgiven, the gospel message be preached, and mankind find forgiveness, and that the reconciliation that Christ would be made because of our sins. Bring in everlasting righteousness. Okay. In verse 25, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. Daniel was now in the king's court in Babylon. The Babylonians had come into Judah, the southern kingdom of Judah, had laid siege to Jerusalem, had defeated the country, had taken away the smartest, most brilliant, best taught people of the area, particularly the king's court. Okay, Daniel was a son of the king. He was one of those who was brought to Babylon. He went to the Chaldean colleges to learn what they had to know, and and so as Daniel is serving in the king's court, Nebuchadnezzar, Jerusalem was destroyed. The walls were torn down. The temple was destroyed. The walls were torn down. And so there would come forth, when Babylon would fall and the Medo-Persians would defeat them, basically, that it would be they who would send forth the command to restore Jerusalem, to build the walls again, to build the streets, even in troublous times. Read the book of Ezra, that in the rebuilding of the temple, how there were those who tried to stop the building of the wall of Jerusalem. They feared what the Jews were doing. They feared Jerusalem being built up again, and so they're trying using every tool they had at their disposal to try to stop these walls from being built. So in troublous times, the walls would even be built. And he goes on, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. Oh, incidentally, these weeks represent years, okay? Each day would represent a year. There is a point in time that Messiah would be cut off. He was crucified, okay? But not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Okay, now we're starting to see what Jesus is prophesying about. And the people of the prince shall come, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. So there was an abomination, and there was a desolation. Okay, this is what Jesus is talking about. Let the reader understand what the prophecy of Daniel, that they would be destroyed. And verse 27, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. So we talked about the mission of Christ and his coming to the earth. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. So if you think about in the midst of the week, sometime in the middle of that week, the sacrifice and oblation will cease. How? They won't be required to make the sacrifices anymore. the law will be put to rest. The law will be fulfilled in Christ being crucified on the cross. And so the law of Moses will have been nailed to the cross, in Colossians 2:14. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice of oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even unto the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So there is an abomination that shall make desolate, the abomination of desolation. It's going to end the Jewish economy. In fact, there will be no doubt that the new law of Christ is enforced. There will be no doubt that the law of Moses will be put away. Okay, it's going to, and this abomination that makes desolate shall ensure that. Okay, so when back in Matthew 24, when he talks about in verse 15 the abomination of desolation, that's what Daniel was prophesying. And let me turn there back again. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judah flee into the mountains. So when they see that which Daniel was speaking about, that which lay waste to Jerusalem, get out of town, run to the mountains. Okay. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. Why would that be? Don't try to go gather. You ever hear about it when your house is on fire? Don't go in to grab your valuables. Don't go back in because you're liable to lose your life. That's what Jesus is saying. Don't go try to get your valuables. Don't try to go down and collect down from the housetop and gather every belongings you get out. If you're in the field, don't go back in Jerusalem and try to get your valuables. Go to the mountains. There would going to be enough time. They would not have time. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. Why? It would be so devastating that having a child, an infant, to care for would be burdensome. Okay, in order to save your own life and that of your infant child would be very burdensome. So that's what he's saying. Woe unto them, it's going to be very hard. Okay, but pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. Why not in the winter? It's cold. Go up to the mountains and it's cold. You ever been to the mountains when it's cold? We've been camping in the Ouachita Mountains during spring break, which is March, which is early spring, And so, but it's freezing. You think of spring, it's nice and warm. No, it's freezing down in the mountains. Well, think about it in winter. Okay. And what about the Sabbath day?
Because by law they were only supposed to travel.
Okay.
That they shut the doors of the city.
They shouldn't what?
They would shut the doors.
Exactly. Now, as far as the Sabbath day, the law of Moses will have been nailed to the cross, so they were no longer holden to that Sabbath day journey. Those believers, the Christians. Okay. But yes, they would close the wall. They'd close the doors to the gates to Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. I think that goes way back to when they first built the walls of Jerusalem, reestablished everything. They'd have these merchants come outside the city gates, outside Jerusalem, and everybody wanted to go shopping, like on first Monday, or third Monday. Everybody wanted to go shopping, and so they'd go out the gates, and of course, this was on the Sabbath day. They were not to be doing this, and so the prophet came out and he pulled his hair out and basically. And he forbid them. So at that point, they began to close the gates on the Sabbath day. And so if you were inside Jerusalem on when this abomination of desolation, all the signs that indicate that the desolation was about to take place, well, it would be hard to get out of town because all the gates were sealed up. Okay. Verse 21, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. So what was about to happen would be so chilling, so severe, that not only had it not happened up to that point in time, nothing so terrible, but also has never happened since. So when we think about all of the terrible things that happened in the world wars, okay, and all the massacres and all the things that go on, Jesus is saying nothing that bad nothing has ever happened or will happen as bad as what was going to happen in this abomination of desolation. In verse 22, and except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. For some reason, well, we hadn't gotten there yet. The abomination of desolation, it was such a destruction, and it was abominable in the sense that the temple was a holy place. It was a place only for sacrifice of the lamb, and only for those approved sacrifices. And Gentiles had a practice of profaning those things that are holy. Back in the days, the Maccabees, back before the New Testament was written, and after the Old Testament, last prophet of the Old Testament wrote, Malachi, that the Greeks came down, Antiochus Epiphanes, he came down and he profaned the temple in that he offered swine as sacrifice. So that was an abomination. Okay. He incidentally destroyed the temple too. He laid waste to the temple. But that was abominable. And so as they considered the abomination of desolation, that was abominable, it was horrible, and that also left desolate their practice, their facilities for practicing their authorized worship, of course. When I say authorized worship, according to the law of Moses, but it was going to lay waste, lay desolate, leave desolate all that was there. And he says, except those days be shortened. So basically, he was warning them about the coming of the Gentiles. The Roman Empire, when they encircled Jerusalem to lay siege to it, as it was, the Christians recognized what was going on. And for some reason, the troops were pulled back for about 3 days. Okay, and that allowed the time for people to escape. As history tells us, all the Christians who were familiar with the teaching of Jesus about the abomination of desolation, they were able to escape Jerusalem. And accordingly, not a Christian was killed in this siege, but many Jews were killed. And it was a very bloody incident, and it was some of the things they did were just horrible. But they laid waste to the city in that siege. But those days being shortened was that they were allowed a period of time to escape. And so that's what it was. There was so much that if it were possible, they shall deceive, for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Verse 23. Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. So there are going to be false prophets. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that, if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect, of course, of God, the Christians, the believers, so obeyed. And there are those who would say, here I am, I'm Christ. Don't believe it. There be false Christs, false prophets. Behold, I have told you before. So don't say I didn't warn you. That's what Jesus was telling you. Don't say I didn't warn you. Behold, I have told you before. Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, Behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even to the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. He's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. It's such a tremendous event that nothing like it has ever happened or ever will. And so, as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even to the west, when we look at a thunderstorm, particularly in the west, when I say in the western United States, as we see the lightning storm in the far distance, we can see those lightning strikes, right? Everybody can see that. And as Jesus was saying, just as the lightning strikes, everybody can see it all over. Okay? So as the destruction of Jerusalem is coming, my judgment upon Jerusalem, everybody's going to see it. It's not going to be something that's hidden. So shall the coming of the Son of Man be. He's talking about his judgment. He's not talking about his literal return to the earth, rather his judgment upon Jerusalem that he's been talking about, warning to his disciples at this point. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles or vultures be gathered together. we know that when an animal dies in wherever it is, in the desert, on the street, or whatever, we usually see vultures start circling around, come down, they munch on it, And so wherever the carcass is, you're going to see the vultures. And so wherever the dead body of Judaism is, when you see that destruction coming, the vultures are going to be around it. It's not going to be noticeable. You'll see it. It's not going to be hidden. Okay. Any questions so far? Thoughts or? Okay. Verse 29. Apocalyptic literature, verses 29 through 31. Apocalyptic literature, we talked about this sometime a little bit before, to indicate major changes both politically and socially. Let's give you an example. Before I just mentioned this is what they were, but let's give you concrete examples of apocalyptic literature to show you I'm not full of hot air. This is, in fact, Scripture. The downfall of Babylon was prophesied in Isaiah 13:10. Look at the kind of words that are used by inspiration of the Holy Spirit. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. So the stars of heaven and the constellations, let's talk about the stars, right? These are the political figures. They're going to fall. They won't show. They won't give their light. The sun shall be darkened in its going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. That kind of language indicating, in this case, the downfall of Babylon. The downfall of Idumea in Isaiah 34:4 and 5. And all the host of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll, and all their hosts shall fall down, as the leaf falleth off from the vine, and as of a falling fig from the fig tree. So very figurative language. The host of heaven being the stars, they'll fall, okay? They'll be dissolved. Be rolled together as a scroll. And then as a leaf fall off the vine, and the falling of fig from the fig tree. So everything just dropping off. The political change, the cessation of the existence. Okay. The fall of the leaders in Egypt, in Ezekiel 32, verses 7 and 8. And when I shall put thee out, I will cover the heaven and make the stars thereof dark. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon shall not give her light. All the bright lights of heaven will I make dark over thee, and set darkness upon thy land, saith the Lord God. This is very language to express great changes, downfalls, basically, and just the nature of the language. Okay, so as we look at Matthew 24, verse 29, we'll see the same kind of language, same kind of concept. So as we consider, immediately after the tribulation, at those days, shall the sun be darkened. Did I goose something up? Okay, we've lost electricity. No?
Yeah, turned off.
Yeah. There we go. I got it. It's on right now. It'll come up. We'll have to rely upon our own Bibles. It should be. It's cooling down now, it looks like. Okay, you're trying to hit the light so you can see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see if I hit this again, will it start it back? If I hit this again, will it start it back up? Because it's flashing green now. I guess I'll.
May take a little more.
Okay, when it comes back up. All right. So as we look at the same kind of language in Matthew 24:29, immediately after the tribulation, it's talking about, of course, the destruction of Jerusalem. Of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Okay. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And okay, let's stop there. So it's when we go back to chapter 23, verse 38, when I said this is the key to understanding Matthew 24, the first part of 24. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. He's warning the Jews that judgments are coming upon Jerusalem, that all the innocent blood shed on the earth they'll be held responsible for it. Okay, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zacharias, son of Barachias, whom he slew between the temple and the altar. Verse 35. So as we look at this, their house is going to be left to them desolate, and it was when the Romans came and encircled Jerusalem. Everything was destroyed. As a matter of fact, they kept very diligent records of their bloodlines. How would they know who was of the tribe of Levi to have the priests? How would they know who would be in line for high priest, who are of the bloodline of Aaron, the priest? Okay, they kept diligent records of all these bloodlines. Particularly, how would they know when the Christ came? You know, when we look at Matthew chapter 1 about the bloodline of Jesus through Joseph from David, and then we look at the same, not the same, but another bloodline from Adam all the way on Mary's side through Jesus. Do I have that backward? Yeah, I think it's right. That the bloodline was very important to identify who, because we know that Jesus had to come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The promise was given to each of those that through them all the families of the earth would be blessed. The Messiah would come through their bloodline. Also that through David, out of Jesse would be a shoot. David was promised that through his bloodline the Christ would come. When Jesus asked the question, when the Lord said to my Lord, who was David talking about? Okay, he was asking the Pharisees who they were talking about, identifying him as not only one of the sons of David, but also deity. At any rate, so bloodlines were very important, but when the Romans came and they laid siege and they destroyed everything, they destroyed all those records. There's no way they can prove which of them could serve as a legitimate priest. Which of them can serve as a legitimate high priest? They don't have the records anymore. When he said, "Behold, your house is left unto you desolate," that's exactly what he meant. There's no way that they can legitimately return to temple worship. Not only was the law nailed to the cross, they have no way of trying to even fulfill the law of Moses. So it was just a total devastation. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn. Why would all the tribes of the earth mourn? It was such a devastating, tragic event. Everybody knows, all the earth will mourn. They shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. It's just more of that kind of apocalyptic literature, showing that Jesus is behind all of this. Let's see. So as we look at this, Foy E. Wallace Jr. wrote, "The signs in the heavens, the darkening sun, and the falling stars refer to the falling of Jewish dignitaries, casting down of authorities and powers, long established, and signified the darkness that settled upon the Jewish state." They were just... Okay. So, you recognize these busts? Okay. "And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet," in verse 31, "and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other." His elect being Christians, they were scattered. They were scattered. He will gather from the four winds. Okay. "Now learn the parable of a fig tree when his branch is not yet tender." So he's showing forth signs. He's just finished giving them signs about the identifying when to get out of Jerusalem. The abomination of desolation will be coming. And now he says, "Now learn the parable of the fig tree when the branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves. Ye know that summer is nigh. So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away." So he's saying, it's as sure can be. It's going to happen. What I say is going to come to pass. And so when you see these things, you know it's near. and this generation not pass away. It's going to happen in your lifetime. That's what he's saying. You're going to see this happen. Okay. And so we know that the judgment upon Jerusalem came in their lifetime. In fact, the history records it happened in the year 70, AD 70. And there's a lot of historic writing that would given that, the events that took place. All right. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Okay, well that's, verse 36 is the transition. We'll discuss that in a little bit later. So, as Jesus gave the signs of the destruction of Jerusalem, and talking about the end is not yet come, then shall the end come, those verses that we looked at. So he's talking about the end. And then we look at 1 Peter 4:7, but the end of all things is at hand. When Peter was writing this stuff, writing the epistle of 1 Peter, that he says the end of all things is at hand. What's he talking about? I think he's talking about Jerusalem. It can't be the end of the world because it's been 2,000 years since he wrote it, about 2,000 years. Okay, so it can't be the end of the world. It can't be the last day. Rather, it's some other end, and Jesus uses this same term, the end is not yet here, or the end will, this same terminology, showing that the destruction of Jerusalem is the end that Peter seems to be, he is referring to. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about Nero. That's his different busts of Nero from different artists. Okay. What about Nero? The epistle of 1 Peter was written about 64, 65 AD. Okay. The wars that began from the Jewish revolt began in about 66 AD. And there's a whole story behind that. I don't know if we need to go into all of that, but we'll just cover a few things. The Great Fire of Rome, we discussed a little bit. Rome burned, and it erupted on the night of 18th July to 19th July, 64. The fire started at the southeastern end of the Circus Maximus and shops selling flammable goods. That's a good place for fire to take off, flammable goods. The extent of the fire is uncertain. According to Tacitus, who was 9 at the time of the fire, it spread quickly and burned for over 5 days, according to Tacitus' Annals. Suetonius says the fire raged for 6 days and 7 nights. The Lives of 12 Caesars, and that's from his reference, The Lives of 12 Caesars, Life of Nero, number 38. A pillar set by Domitius states the fire burned for 9 days. So it's not exactly, they're in full agreement about how long it burned, but it was certain it burned for days. Now this is some history about the Jewish revolt beginning in AD 66 that brought the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Okay. Probably, it's good to discuss a little bit about this simply because when we understand the Jews rebelled against the Roman Empire. They were successful at first, but of course when the Romans really resolved force to put them down, they as successful and as capable as the Jewish fighters were, they were not able to defeat the strength of the Roman Empire. And whereas the Christians didn't participate in this, of course, even the Apostle Simon, who was a zealot, he didn't participate in this, but the Jews did. And the perception was that Christianity came out of the Jews, which is true. They perceived it was a sect of the Jews. And so with the aftermath of the fire, and we discussed some about how Nero persecuted the Christians, blaming the fire upon them, that although the Christians did not rebel against Rome, Rome had an attitude about Christians that they were suffering because of the rebellion of the Jews. Okay, so as we look at 1 Peter, if you would just go ahead and turn to 1 Peter as we, chapter 4. The launching pad was verse 7. But the end of all things is at hand. Be ye therefore sober and watch unto prayer. The end of all things being the destruction of Jerusalem, so they should be watching because troublesome times are coming. 1 Peter 4:12-13, he writes, Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. But rejoice inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy. So there was a fiery trial coming upon the Christians that Peter was trying to prepare them for. And think about, since the time of the trial is coming, they shouldn't think it strange that this trial should come. James chapter 1, verses 2-4 writes regarding fiery trials. James 1, 2-4. My brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. Look at verse 12. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. So, in correlating with what Peter was writing, be ready for the fiery trial. Don't think it's strange, rather use this as a matter of fact, because interestingly enough, the temptations, the trials that one would face actually are a blessing, strange as it may seem. Look at, of course, in Acts chapter 5, verses 12-42, it talks about Stephen and his stoning. 1 Peter 1, verses 6-7, wherein ye greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptations. For the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold, that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ, whom having not seen ye love, and whom, though now ye see him not, yet believing ye rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory. So that the trials they were going to face that Peter's preparing them for, they should count it all joy. They should count it a blessing. They should take advantage of that trial, because if we endure it, what do they say? That which doesn't kill you, what does it do? It makes you stronger. And so we think about our faith in Christ, and we face resistance to our faith. Doesn't it not build our resolve to serve him? Doesn't it make us more determined to serve Christ? Doesn't it build our faith rather than destroy it? Well, it could destroy it if the trial. It depends on the soil upon which the word was planted. Okay. All right. So let's go back to Matthew 24. As this is Matthew 24, and continuing on with Jesus' statement about the signs that they were asking about the destruction of the temple. So he gave them all the signs that would accompany or precede the destruction of the temple. And then when he gets to verse 36, he changes tack, changes discussion. The topic of the discussion changes. In verse 36, but of the day and hour knoweth no man. But of that day and hour knoweth no man. No, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. So here's the question. If in the first part of chapter 24 he was talking about the end of the world, as many premillennialists say that first part of chapter 24 are the signs of the times that would lead up to the end of the world, okay, I should say lead up to the Christ's coming. That's what they really say. His literal second coming. Let me recap this. First part of Matthew 24 is about the signs of Jesus' judgment upon Jerusalem. And although he talks about the Son of Man coming, it's not his literal coming, rather it's his judgment upon Jerusalem. The second part of Matthew 24, beginning in verse 36, Jesus is talking about his literal second coming, when that would be the last day. Okay. Now, the question is, if Jesus is giving them signs of the last day, that is, the signs that would lead to his literal second coming, to maybe clarify, premillennialists believe that Jesus is going to literally come, set foot in Jerusalem, and build a kingdom there and reign in Jerusalem for 1,000 years. That's their idea, premillennialism. Millennial being 1,000 years, pre meaning before the end of the world. So he'll reign in Jerusalem for 1,000 years before the end of the world. And so they take Matthew 24, first part, as though this were the day that Jesus literally comes, and these are the signs of the times. And so they're always looking at current events to try to interpret things, try to cram these into what the scriptures say. See, here are the signs of the times. And they look at, like, in 1948 or 49, when the United Nations decided to make Israel a sovereign nation again. Okay. People were saying, see, this is it. All the Jews are going back to Jerusalem. All the Jews are going back to the promised land, just like the Bible foretold. They forget they already did go back under King Cyrus. They were allowed to go back. The walls were built. The temple was built. The temple worship was restored. The prophecies of that was fulfilled. So this has nothing to do with that. So they sort of ignore that part, though. And so they look for signs of the times, the current events, to try to squeeze in current events to fit into what their interpretation of Jesus returning to the earth to reign for 1,000 years. Okay. But here's the question. If the first part is talking about literal signs that would lead to his return, literal return, why is it then he goes right into it and says, but I don't know when it's going to happen? I'll give you the signs, but you can't tell. You can't tell it's going to happen. That's ridiculous. Jesus gave them concrete evidence about this is what you look for, and when this happens, get out of Jerusalem. And then he goes on, but of that day, he's talking about the last day, the end of the world. Knoweth no man, not the angels, not even the Son of Man, but my Father only. Okay? But as the day of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Now, he's saying it's going to be business as usual in the world. Just as in the days of Noah when the flood came, they didn't believe that they were going to be destroyed. They were making a mockery of Noah. He's being a preacher of righteousness. They didn't believe him. It was just 8 souls were saved in that ark. But yet, when that rain started, everybody was living life as they normally did. What were they doing?
Giving into marriage.
Yeah. Before they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark. And knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. When the Son of Man comes, that's it. There's nothing more. And everybody's going to be living their lives normally, marrying and giving in marriage, eating, drinking, being merry. And when Jesus comes, it's going to be a big surprise. Because there aren't going to be any signs. Then shall the two be in the field, and one shall be taken and the other left. We should go to 1 Thessalonians regarding the last day. Turn to 1 Thessalonians. Yes, chapter 4. He's actually, let's see, beginning of verse 13. Those in Thessalonica apparently had some concern about those who have obeyed the gospel but then died before Jesus returned. They thought they've lost their opportunity to go into heaven. Okay. So as Paul writes to them, says in verse 13, "But I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that ye sorrow not, those that have died, that ye sorrow not, even as others which have no hope." So there were the Gentiles, or I should say, the non-believers, who disbelieved, didn't receive the word, did not obey the gospel, and as they died, they have no hope. But those who have believed and obeyed the gospel, lived faithfully, when they died, they still have that hope. You know, the account of Lazarus and the rich man tells us when we die, our spirit departs, and we go to the unseen realm, the Hadean realm. There's paradise and there's torment. And there's that waiting place where we wait for the judgment, final judgment. Okay. Well, so those who go into Abraham's bosom in the Hadean realm, they have hope. Okay. Actually, it's more than hope. It's reality to them. But we still have hope. So as Paul writes, that ye sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. Those who have not believed, they have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. So those who have died, God's going to bring with him. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. This is one point where the language, the English language of 1611 is different from the English language of 2015. When it says we shall prevent, does anybody have the New King James Version? Can you read that passage?
The Lord will by no means precede those who are asleep.
Precede, that's right. Prevent or precede will not go before. We're not going to, so rather, so that we which are, we believe Jesus died, even so them that which also sleep, who have died, we're gone. For this we say unto you, that by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not go before them which are asleep, precede them. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel. This is a case where it's not going to be hidden. Nobody knows what's going to happen, but nobody's going to be confused about what's happening. It's going to be with a shout, the voice of archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. It's going to be a loud noise. And everybody's going to know this is the last time. Okay? And the dead in Christ shall rise first. This is the general resurrection. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with him in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Question, is Jesus going to set foot in Jerusalem when he comes back? He's not even going to set foot upon the face of the earth. He can't go to Jerusalem and establish a kingdom because, first of all, the kingdom has already been established on the day of Pentecost. Second of all, he's not going to set foot upon the face of the earth and set up a kingdom, and reign. He's going to be in the clouds, in the air. And first, the dead in Christ shall rise, the general resurrection, and then they'll arise and we'll follow them. We'll be with them and meet the Lord in the air. And there we shall be, let me see. And so shall we ever be with the Lord. So this is eternity beginning. Wherefore comfort one another with these words. Isn't it comforting to know when Christ comes, all those who've obeyed the gospel, lived faithfully, and died, well, they still have that promise of eternity. As we have that promise of eternity, we have that hope. They have that reassurance because they passed on, and they see literally the bosom of Abraham, paradise, and they're waiting for that reward, eternal life with Christ and the Father. So Jesus will not set foot on the earth, but rather he'll come with a shout. It's going to be, and that's it. There's no second chances. When Jesus returns, that's it. I spoke about God as the God of second chances. All through this life, as we have it now, we have a second chance, and a third, fourth. Okay. We can make our slates new. Okay, I see I'm coming up to 5 minutes, right? And whereas, so while we're here on earth, while we're alive in this fleshly body, we have the opportunity to take advantage of that second chance. But when Jesus comes, there's no second chance. Whatever state you find yourself in when he comes, that's what your judgment will be. Whether it be eternal life because you've obeyed Christ and you're waiting and watching for him, watching under prayer, or if you've rejected him, to receive the condemnation. Okay, so back to Matthew 24. When he says, so when you say 2 women shall be grinding in the mill, and the one shall be taken and the other left, that's when Jesus returns. You'll have those believers who will be taken, and the non-believers will not be taken to meet Christ in the air. Okay, that's what all he's talking about. And so he says, watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. You don't know. So there are no signs of Jesus' second coming. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in that watch the thief would come, he would have watched, and would not have suffered this house to be broken up. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. So there are no signs. So in the first part, up to verse 35, Jesus gave the signs of the destruction of Jerusalem when he would come in judgment upon Jerusalem. Not literally, but in judgment. But in the second part, beginning in verse 36, Jesus is saying, there are no signs of my literal second coming, the last day. Okay. And that's it. All I hit on this map was just the campaigns in the Jewish rebellion and how the Romans put them down, eventually destroyed Jerusalem. And
Does the red represent the Romans and the blue the Jews?
What?
Does the red lines represent the Romans and the blue the Jews?
I have to look at that more closely. It's been a while since I've taught this. The red lines, I think, are, there were different stages that the Romans put down. They took it in stages, and they just marched across. It's very strategic. And so they took down to diminish the resources that the Jews. I don't know if you remember the Gulf War or read anything about it back in '91 and following that. The way the Americans approached to invade Iraq was very strategic. You take down things in stages. And I think that's what the Romans were doing. They were taking down, leading up to the major siege in Jerusalem. So there would be nothing. If they went directly to Jerusalem, they had counterattacks coming from behind. So, but that's all. The Reds, I think, that's just taking the northern country, and then the other approach toward Jerusalem. Okay. This was from the Reader's Digest Encyclopedia, Atlas of the Bible. Reader's Digest is very liberal in their stuff, but they have some. This is historic information that this you can look. You can put this together from the encyclopedias. Some real scholarly work. You just got to be careful when it gets into the spiritual aspect of the Bible. That it's very, very liberal. Okay. All right. So, that completes the study, and it's just about time. Any questions or thoughts about this? Okay. I appreciate your attention on this study. I hope it's been beneficial. It's always a believe it or not, a faith builder, confidence builder that in God, in Christ, and keeping His promises, and that hope that we have for that last day that we'll receive that eternal reward. Thank you for your attention, your comments, and questions.